This is your reality check.
Hi everyone, and welcome to The Reality Check, the weekly Canadian show that explores a wide range of controversies and curiosities using science and critical thinking. This is the show for June 26th, 2018, and I am your host, Darren McKee. With me, as usual, are Adam Gardner.
What's up, Cuboids?
Christina Roach.
Hey everyone.
And producer Pat.
Hi, Checkers.
We have a great show for you, as usual. Christina is going to look into whether baby foreskin is being used in beauty products.
Yeah.
How could that not make the show great? And then I'm going to look into adult and youth correctional statistics in Canada. But first, IV therapy. Adam, does it work? Is it legitimate? What's the deal?
What is the deal with intravenous or IV therapy? IV therapy is all about using an IV to deliver a liquid directly into one's veins. As a child growing up in the 80s, I was all about movies with IV in their titles. 1985 brought Rocky IV, the one with Dolph Lundgren. Then in 1986, we got Star Trek IV, The Voyage Home. It's the one with the whales and the time travel. And surely, Darren, you must remember the 1987 travesty that was Superman IV, The Quest for Peace.
I needed an IV for that one.
Yeah. And in the 80s, they even renamed the popular Star Wars film, which is originally just known as Star Wars, to Star Wars Episode IV, A New Hope. Okay, I kid. Basically, a few weeks ago, I spotted this obvious ad on some actor's social media for Vita Squad, which claimed this IV therapy was used to recover from dehydration and food poisoning. Well, this sounded like nonsense. I thought maybe I'd look this up. Vita Squad is one of many providers who do IV therapy. In this particular case, patients can go to a clinic or have them come to them and hook them up to an IV with all sorts of therapies. The Vita Squad site has a menu with options such as hydration, advertised as the ultimate hangover cure, a fitness solution to maximize muscle recovery, a blend of vitamins and minerals which are said to stimulate metabolism and promote weight loss, a beauty therapy with antioxidants and keratin-fighting ingredients to enhance hair, skin, and nail appearance, a supposed mix of immune system boosting agents, which is mostly a bunch of vitamin C, stress-reducing cocktail, and of course, a solution to detoxify. Finally, there is B12, which they claim will maintain healthy nerve and blood cells to stimulate DNA production to help improve energy and well-being.
Well, I like DNA production.
I'm a big fan of DNA production for sure. Other retailers like Restore IV and countless others offer similar options in their own menus. I don't know why the term menu keeps coming up, maybe because then they're not really claiming that it's medicine. Now, if that set off a few red flags, you're not alone. Now, IV therapy or intravenous therapy is not in itself, strictly speaking, pseudoscience. The term simply means delivering a liquid substance directly into one's veins. This is actually a legitimate and commonly used method of delivering medication or fluid into one's body. A common use is indeed in treating dehydration. IVs are only used when oral hydration, using water alone, or water mixed with small amounts of sugar and salt, is impossible or impractical. A patient may be vomiting so profusely, for example, that even water can't be kept down. Otherwise, a patient may simply be so dehydrated that the immediate hydration of an IV is needed. That said, those people who Vita Squad is targeting are hardly people who are so dehydrated that they actually require an IV. Most of these wealthy, relatively healthy, and maybe a bit hungover people would be better off just having a drink of tap water or something equivalent. With these treatments starting at $100 and going way up, you sure would save a lot of money by spending a couple of bucks on a bottle of Gatorade or even $8 or $9 for a bottle of Pedialyte. Other legitimate uses of IV therapy are the delivery of medication or even blood transfusions. So, do the many other options which these therapies promise count as legitimate medicine? Well, most of them are just vitamin cocktails similar to other alternative medicines one might pick up at your pharmacy. In general, most healthy people have little need for vitamins. There are some exceptions, of course. There's evidence that pregnant women benefit from folic acid, which can be found in prenatal vitamins. And if your doctor recommends a certain vitamin due to a deficiency, taking it orally is an easy way to do it. But these cocktails suggested by the proponents of IV therapy seem to fall outside of the realm of respectable science. Now, we've mentioned before that vitamin C will not boost your immune system and protect you from a cold, but it's in most of these cocktails. There are tons of fad supplements claiming to help with weight loss, but despite what Dr. Oz may try to tell you, they generally don't work, and I don't think the IV therapy one would either. Vitamins will not reduce stress or offer some seemingly magical benefit by promoting DNA or other such nonsense. As for options which are marketed for fitness recovery, it seems like a really poor way of getting your post-workout supplement. It's hard to tackle each individual claim made by these cocktails, but it really does seem like most of these claims are the kind of thing that you would find at a supplement store, and most of those things aren't backed by evidence either. For those few supplements that do actually have some use or benefit, these are quite effective when taken orally. Yes, vitamins will help you have more expensive urine, but taking oral vitamins is much less invasive, much less expensive, and more practical than these treatments, which I would hope most people aren't taking as regularly as one would a daily supplement. Now, a few experts chimed in on this. Tim Caulfield, a professor at the University of Alberta, who we've talked about on the show before, basically says that there's no evidence for IV therapy, a trend that he's been watching. And Scott Gavura, a pharmacist from Toronto who we've had on the show many times before, said that such a treatment should only be beneficial to people with vitamin B12 or iron deficiencies, for example. Now, the real issue here is the unnecessary risk. As medical procedures go, setting up an IV is not particularly dangerous, but this is just considering the benefit. An IV can be painful. It's not a massive pain, but breaking the skin comes with a slight sting. There is a slight risk of infection that can occur anytime the skin is broken. Bacteria can enter the wound and cause some sort of infection. This can, in rare cases, lead to complications like septicemia, which can be life-threatening. There's also a risk of infiltration, which is when fluid accidentally enters surrounding tissue rather than the vein, either because the vein is missed or because the vein bursts, which is something that can happen more commonly in elderly patients. I don't think those elderly patients are the ones that are getting the hangover cure. Other potential issues include fluid overload, hypothermia, electrolyte imbalance, or embolism, which may or may not be a risk depending on how the solution is being administered. So if you have properly trained nurses who kind of know what they're doing, might not be a problem.
Hypothermia?
Yeah, so basically if the solution that's being pumped into someone's blood is too cold, then it can cause hypothermia.
Wow.
So obviously, if there's proper controls in place, this might not be a risk. So I don't want to say you're going to get hypothermia from doing these IV therapies, but these are general risks that one can get from IV therapy.
Now, kind of going against the current of your segment, if I'm really hot on a summer day, should I take cold IV therapy?
No.
Oh.
You could also have a cold glass of water, if that's really a problem.
I heard freezy, and I'll compromise with you on that.
So all of these are minor risks for legitimate medical interventions, but they're hardly worth it when there's little to no benefit. Like with small risks occurring from such treatments as chiropractic or acupuncture, these are small risks which one should only accept when the underlying treatment has value, and these treatments just don't have value. Intravenous therapy, or IV therapy, or FOR therapy, is a legitimate medical procedure, but these trendy elective IV therapies marketed to healthy people as a form of alternative medicine are just a new way to get unproven supplements into your body. While IV therapy is a more effective way to get vitamins and minerals directly into your blood than taking pills orally, these options suggested by the likes of VitaSquad and Restore IV are not evidence-based therapy. Save your money and your veins. If you really need to take vitamins, which most people don't really need to do, you can get a jar filled with hundreds of them that will cost you a fraction of the cost of a single one of these treatments. If you're feeling dehydrated, just have a glass of water. And if you want to avoid getting a hangover, the most reliable method is not to drink too much alcohol the night before.
I know that I've read articles where they talk about Silicon Valley companies that will actually have people come in and treat them after a night of going out and partying.
I've read that too.
Yeah.
A lot of these services will promote their hangover cure as being something you can do. So yeah, they'll come into your hotel and they'll come in with their IV bags and everyone can plug into these IV therapies to do a hangover cure.
I had two main thoughts. It's interesting that some people take all these supposed cures for things that they don't really need. And of course, there's numerous other people that would take these things that do really need them. We just can't get the right people taking the right things. Second, many of the things we talk about as absolute nonsense in the future could be actually legitimate. So you could imagine someone using more sophisticated IV technology or downing a special concoction of nanobots in 30 or 40 years, which would help you not get a hangover. Well, if you think that's weird, I imagine no one believes that there's actually foreskin in beauty products. Right, Cristina?
I'm just going to jump right into this one. So here's how it hit my radar. Pat heard something about foreskin being used in beauty cream on Adam Carolla's podcast. Now, he brought it up in a convo about skin creams when visiting friends a couple of weeks ago. One of them mentioned they've used said product.
Wow.
We say, sounds kind of BS-y though, and we do a bit of research. I read a Vice headline titled, "Is Oprah Supporting the Harvest of Baby Foreskin?" And down the rabbit hole I go head first. So this has come back up in the news, even though Oprah's endorsement of skin cream that supposedly used baby foreskin first hit the interwebs when she pimped it on her show as an anti-aging treatment in the mid-2000s. First, I need to rewind just a little bit and give you guys a quick overview of quote-unquote penis facials. So this seems to be a catalyst for the resurgence of the story, so that's why I want to talk about that a little bit. Now, an article published in HuffPost last month reported that when actor Sandra Bullock, who is 53, appeared on the Ellen DeGeneres show, she divulged that her and her Ocean's 8 co-star Cate Blanchett, who is 49, are big fans of an anti-aging treatment they dub the penis facial. So what Bullock is referring to is the Hollywood EGF facial treatment, which can set you back $650 US. A rep for the Georgia Louise Atelier in New York, which offers the treatment, told HuffPost that it starts with a TCA chemical peel, which is short for trichloroacetic acid, and this essentially dries the top layers of skin, which then peel off. Then they do something called microneedling, which is pretty much what it sounds like. It involves poking tiny holes in your skin, which they claim helps promote healing and the creation of new collagen. This also allows products to penetrate deeper into your skin. A hydrating mask is then applied, and then this is where EGF serum comes in. The Georgia Louise rep explains that EGF is, quote, derived from the progenitor cells of the human fibroblast taken from Korean newborn baby foreskin, which helps to generate collagen and elastin, end quote. So, just to be clear, it's derived from newborn baby foreskins where the cells are taken from, and then new cells are cloned in a lab, and EGF serum only contains those cloned cells.
And it's Korean.
Well, in this case, she specifically says Korean newborn baby foreskin. Now, this isn't exactly new in skincare, and there does seem to be some evidence that EGF may help promote skin rejuvenation. And I link to studies about cosmetic products containing growth factors in the show notes. Now, Rita Levi Montalcini and Stanley Cohen earned a Nobel Prize in 1986 for their discovery of EGF. And EGF has been shown to promote wound healing in clinical studies. An example is the use of fibroblasts to help burn victims regrow skin. For the record, Louise's serum is FDA approved, and clients are informed upfront of the ingredients. Also noteworthy is that the growth factor can also be found in kidneys, urine, and saliva, but it seems cells from the foreskin are preferred in dermatology. Now, Dr. Rachel Nazarian of Schweiger Dermatology Group suggests to HuffPost that it's likely because it's related to the type of cell you're targeting, which is skin. One single male foreskin can retail for around $100,000.
Wow. What? So I assume that has to be a baby foreskin. There's something essentially magical about that?
Apparently. So one single donated foreskin, though, can be used to grow cells for millions of batches of product. So it kind of puts it in perspective, right?
Mm-hmm. Right.
As Nazarian says, once an initial stem cell has been taken from the source, you don't need to keep taking it. You just need the one initial stem cell and you can keep growing it forever. So here's the problem. Cultivating stem cells from baby foreskin is pretty controversial, especially with anti-circumcision activist groups who question the ethics, who liken circumcision to female genital mutilation, and maintain that circumcision is a violation of human rights. Now, since my original intention was to look behind the headline, "Is Oprah supporting the harvest of baby foreskin?" I'm going to put the penis facial and the pro-foreskin advocate controversies aside. That's a whole other can of worms. My mandate is to get to the bottom of the original claim. Does a beauty cream that Oprah uses or used contain baby foreskin in its formulation? And the answer is kind of, sort of. The company who makes the anti-wrinkle cream Oprah endorsed is called Skin Medica. And that's the product that our friend said that she had used before. Their products, the TNS Recovery Complex and TNS Essential Serum, do indeed contain neonatal fibroblasts.
That sounds a lot better than the words we've been using.
A 1.3 ounce size bottle of the serum is listed on Skin Medica's website at a suggested retail price of $320.
Oh my, a 1 point what?
3 ounces.
Wow.
Now, as the Vice article reports, the company's founder, Dr. Richard Fitzpatrick, maintains that the ingredient in the cream and serum comes from cells grown from one single foreskin donated over 20 years ago. So at more like 25, because this particular article was from a few years ago. So there's actually no human tissue in their products. He told the San Diego City Beat, initially there was a misunderstanding and people thought we were actually grinding up the foreskin.
Of course.
Yeah. So there was a lot of snickering and laughing about people putting this foreskin product on their face, end quote. Now, I'm not one to go around telling people where they should draw the line in their pursuit of the holy grail of youth. Stem cells seem to be revolutionizing medical skincare, so I believe this is just the tip of the iceberg. EGF can be found in a myriad of skincare products currently, not just Skin Medica. But it wouldn't be TRC if I didn't burst your bubble somewhat, right? Here's an excerpt from an article on Inverse.com from March regarding the EGF facial treatment. While medical researchers continue to investigate stem cells for potential restorative properties, there is little evidence to suggest that cell regeneration could take place when stem cells are used only as a topical treatment. There's little evidence to suggest the EGF serum generates collagen and elastin any more than other aspects of the treatment. Given that the baby foreskin is applied after a chemical peel using salicylic and glycolic acid and is followed by an electrifying mask, there are too many variables in the process to point to foreskin's necessity. So in conclusion, although headlines with terms like penis facial or baby foreskin cream have a much sassier and clickbaity ring to them, to use them in this instance or to suggest that Oprah is supporting the harvest of baby foreskin is not exactly accurate.
I wonder if, you kind of mentioned other sources of stem cells, but like if people really have a problem with the quote-unquote harvesting of foreskins, which doesn't seem to be necessary or happening, you could just get stem cells from placenta or some other method to do something similar, I imagine.
I think Cristina mentioned in the segment that, and it was really brief, that this particular kind of stem cells were useful because they were skin.
Well,
yeah, I guess there's not much skin that you would take off of a baby, right?
Right. That's the suggestion why it seems to be more popular in the dermatology realm than urine or...
Probably less controversial than using aborted fetuses.
Yes, one would think.
One would think.
But still pretty controversial.
Thanks, Cristina. And now to our final segment of the show, Adult and Youth Correctional Statistics in Canada. I saw a headline recently that said nearly half of Canada's incarcerated youth are Indigenous, according to Statistics Canada. That's the full headline.
Mm-hmm. I actually saw this today, Darren.
I did too. I'm really happy you're covering this, Darren.
Cool. For those that don't know much about Canada's Indigenous population, this might be surprising, but it seemed to fit with my general understanding of a disproportionality in the domain of incarceration. But a general understanding isn't good enough. We want to know if it's true. First, let's just appreciate the headline. We often criticize headlines on the show for being misleading, but this one at least makes a clear statement. Nearly half, and then according to a particular source, Statistics Canada. So we're looking for something close to under 50%, that would be nearly half, and FYI, Canadians generally trust Statistics Canada, or StatsCan, as we call it. Mm-hmm. The story, which I read on CBC, but CBC was running a Canadian press piece by Kelly Geraldine Malone, helpfully links to the StatsCan report. Both links are available at trcpodcast.com.
Great website.
The report, with the title Adult and Youth Correctional Statistics in Canada 2016-17, came out on June 19th, 2018, so that's why you're hearing about it now. Before getting to the claim, the first heading of the report is called Adult and Youth Correctional Populations Are Declining. That seems pretty informative. That seems important, so I want to briefly talk about that as well as having it provide a bit more numerical context. Quote, there were, on average, 117,000 adults, meaning 18 years or older, supervised in either custody or a community program on a given day in the 11 reporting provinces and territories in 2016-2017. There's actually 13 total, by the way. This represented a rate of 422 offenders per 100,000 adult population, down 3% from the previous year and 17% lower compared with 2012-2013. Things are going down. Another quote, there were, on average, 23,000 adult offenders under federal supervision per day in 2016-17. This was equivalent to 79 offenders per 100,000 adult population, down 1% from 2015-16 and 6% lower compared to 2012-2013. More stats for you. Another quote, there were, on an average day, 7,600 youth aged 12 to 17 supervised in custody or a community program in the 10 reporting provinces and territories in 2016-17. This represented a rate of 44 youth per 10,000, notice not per 100,000, youth population, down 10% from the previous year and 37% lower compared with 2012-2013.
So youth incarceration rates are significantly higher than adult incarceration rates.
Correct.
Is what I'm seeing here.
They are higher.
Okay.
The declines follow a trend similar to police-reported data, where the rate of youth charged by police fell by 27% from 2012 to 2016.
Wow.
All of this seems quite good. But what about the Indigenous youth claim?
Darren, before you get to the meat of the segment as to whether or not the actual claim is true, do you have numbers on what percentage of the population, of the youth population, is Indigenous?
Excellent question, Pat, and that's coming right up. Aboriginal youth accounted for 46% of admissions to correctional services in the 10 reporting jurisdictions in 2016-17, while representing 8% of the general youth population in those same jurisdictions.
Wow.
Wow.
Thus, we see that the headline is true. 46% is nearly half. Of course, the only reason that is significant is because it's much higher than the population.
Oh, yeah.
That's the disproportionality I mentioned. And I think in some provinces, it's like 80%. I just saw that for Manitoba. Additionally, quote, Aboriginal youth are overrepresented in both custody and community supervision, accounting for 50% of custody admissions and 42% of community supervision admissions. Further, another quote, Aboriginal females accounted for a greater proportion of custody admissions among youth relative to their male counterparts. Aboriginal female youth accounted for 60% of female admissions, while Aboriginal male youth made up 47% of male youth admissions. And as for adults, quote, Aboriginal adults represented about 5% of the Canadian adult population in 2016-17, while accounting for 28% of admissions to provincial territorial correctional services and 27% of admissions to federal correctional services. This is indeed worse than it was 10 years ago. Now, you heard the term Aboriginal there, and there's definitely an ongoing discussion in Canada about what terminology to use. Perhaps a future segment, but for the moment, Wikipedia lends a hand and says this. Indigenous people in Canada, also known as Native Canadians or Aboriginal Canadians, are the Indigenous peoples within the boundaries of present-day Canada. They comprise the First Nations, Inuit, and Métis, although Indian is the term still commonly used in legal documents. The descriptors Indian and Eskimo have somewhat fallen into disuse in Canada, and some consider them to be pejorative. And by some, it means most.
Everybody.
Right.
Yeah, everybody.
Well, we were in an Ottawa bubble, but yes. Similarly, Aboriginal as a collective noun is a specific term of art used in some legal documents, including the Constitution Act, 1982, though in some circles that word is also falling into disfavor, and I would also say in many circles.
Yeah.
So those are the stats, but what about the why? This is a longer story, which should probably be a future segment or an interview with someone who knows more, but the shorter story is that Canada, like many European powers, was also a colonial power, but to itself. Indigenous people were to be assimilated, and this led to horrible things like removing children from their families, and even worse, those children then getting sexually abused by the nice white people that were supposed to assimilate them. Persistent racism and generational traumas caused by whites in power have led Indigenous peoples to be more marginalized in numerous ways, and in the broad sense, that leads to a lot of the stats I mentioned above.
I'm trying to let that sink in, actually.
Yeah, me
those
too.
Those numbers are pretty incredible.
Yeah, I'm pretty blown away right now. It's not... I mean, just considering the source, when I did see the headline the first time, I figured it was legit. But of course, it seemed half. It seemed kind of high. But yeah, I'm blown away by these numbers you're giving us, Darren.
And I was a bit as well. I mean, I kind of knew about the 5% stat and at least 20% of the prison population, so I knew for adults it was very skewed. And for youth, I thought, okay, it could be something similar. And it could be because many other Canadian youth are just escaping poverty in different ways or not committing those crimes. I also thought it's interesting in terms of what gets reported in what way. I think this is an important story, and thus it was a useful article with that headline. But the other story is crimes going down, not as many youth are being arrested or imprisoned and all that sort of thing. Like, that is also true.
Yep.
It's just interesting what people focus on for what reasons.
There's multiple angles that you could look at this, and it may also be that certain communities are more harshly treated by police or more strictly convicted. But it could also just be that, there are problems in these communities that just result from, socioeconomic status and all sorts of other things. So it's hard to tease apart, but however you tease it apart, it's really unfortunate. And
it's a problem.
It's a problem that needs to be addressed.
And I do think if we looked at the numbers, we'd probably find that addiction is a really big problem in those communities for young kids, right?
Yeah.
I know that at one point suicide was also a really big problem.
Quite.
Yeah.
Yes. Thanks for joining us once again. Adam showed us that IV therapy is not for you. It really shouldn't be for anyone unless you have a serious problem with a doctor who says you should take this IV. Mm-hmm. And regarding Foreskin, Cristina showed us that there is something that was originally from a child's foreskin that is in beauty products due to the synthesized cells, but the idea of ground-up foreskin from children is not at all what you should be picturing. And finally, I gave you some correctional statistics from adult and youth in Canada to show you that, yes, about half of Canada's incarcerated youth are from Indigenous populations.
Sadly.
Yes, quite sad. Until next time, think better to act better.
Peace out, Cuboids.
Stay classy, not smart-assy, and leave us a 5-star review on Apple Podcasts and iTunes.
I'll talk to you soon, Checkers.
For show notes or to discuss this episode, visit our Facebook page and website at trcpodcast.com. For general inquiries or to send a topic or parody suggestion, email info@trcpodcast.com. Help support the show by leaving a review on iTunes and liking us on Facebook. Follow us on Twitter at TRC_podcast.
Outtakes.
Cristina showed us that, yes, some baby products have cells that originally came from some foreskin.
Not baby products, skincare, beauty products.
Sorry. Soylent Green is people.
Well, you...